Hi everyone. Today I'm going to continue on with my little three-part mini-series on the films of Sam Peckinpah, which I call Peckinpah's Prime. He made 7 movies in 6 years when he was at the height of his creative energy, and before he became his alcohol addiction, his cocaine addiction sort of sapped those creative energies. But in the 7 films he made between 69 and 75, I think they're some of the most interesting films of that era, of an era that was pretty interesting itself in Hollywood. And I saw them all. I saw them all several times when I was younger. So it's a kind of rediscovery for me. But I think he's a film director who needs to be remembered. His films didn't turn up on the Sight and Sound list, the critics list, or the directors list. I think The Searchers was the only Western movie that came up on both lists. But Sam needs to be remembered, and I'm going to call him Sam. I apologize for that. I don't like doing that because if I knew who the guy was, but I've read a couple of biographies, I've watched lots of commentaries, I've read other film studies of Peckinpah, and he's one of those artists, his first name is really, everybody refers to him as Sam, so I apologize for doing that. But Ballad of Cable Hogue is just what it says in the title. It's a ballad, it's an elegy. It's a story about betrayal. It opens the opening credits sequence, which is really brilliantly edited. Cable Hogue is a prospector. This is out in the deserts of Nevada in the early 1900s. He has 2 other so-called friends with him, but the water's running out. There's no water nearly available, so the other 2 say, "You've got to be sacrificed," and they leave. They leave Cable basically to die, because he would never be able to find water. But Cable survives, and in the 4th day he sees mud on his shoe. He's got water. So this is in the opening credits, and so now we see the story of Cable Hogue. He realizes quickly that there's a lot of value to finding water. And so he becomes an entrepreneur. He is the epitome of what Americans like to think of as the rugged individualist. This is what our country was built on: rugged individualism. And this ties into Sam's ancestry, because I think both his grandfathers came with nothing to the West, and they both became entrepreneurs and they became very successful. So, but in the beginning they were ragtag. They were sort of Cable Hogue type people that had to really use all their sources of ingenuity to succeed. But Cable Hogue is a ballad, but it's also a romance. This is probably Sam's only real romance of his movies, and it's also a comedy. Sam thought it was a comedy, and it draws into his mournfulness for this passing of rugged individualism, and we get the encroachment of society and all the evils of society and technological advances, because in the final act we see an automobile. Cable sees his first automobile that he's ever seen, and the automobile is emblematic of that times are changing. He has become, his way of life is becoming outmoded, and so the automobile figures very much in this final act, very dramatically. In my previous video on the Wild Bunch, I did not mention actors. I sort of focused on Peckinpah's career and up to the Wild Bunch, but Sam really depended on actors. Stella Stevens, in an interview in the supplements of this Warner Archive release, talks about that Sam told her that the 90% of the director's job is to cast the film well. And he really did depend on great casting, because all these characters, they're archetypes. They're very familiar characters. Sam had worked in westerns and television, creating, writing, producing. Television in the 1950s, where Peckinpah was working, that was everything. I think Saturday night on CBS was all westerns in prime time, up to Gunsmoke, which was the most popular television show on TV. Bonanza later became the #1 show on NBC on Sunday nights. So all the stories of the West have been told. So if you're like me and you grew up with all these stories, there's nothing new about the storylines or the actors, or not the actors, but the characters. So he needs strong characters. Now in The Wild Bunch, he had Robert Ryan and William Holden, who really provided the gravitas for that movie, that film that really needed that. And then the other actors on both The Wild Bunch and the posse that was pursuing them, the bounty hunters that were pursuing the Wild Bunch. We get Strother Martin, we get L.Q. Jones, part of the Wild Bunch. We have Warren Oates and Ben Johnson. We have Bo Hopkins. Dub Taylor shows up. These are all the Peckinpah's stock company, and they have to deliver. Because they're playing archetypal roles, and Sam doesn't waste any character actor. They all have to be vivid and unique, which they are. I mean, so Strother Martin and L.Q. Jones are in Cable Hogue are basically playing the same characters they played in The Wild Bunch, and Strother Martin is I mean, they're both great, but Strother Martin is just. If you don't know him, hear the name. He was famous for his line from Cool Hand Luke. What we have here is failure to communicate. In his inimitable voice, I won't try to impersonate him. So he needs these character actors to bring to life these archetypes. And in Cable Hogue, he has a great star in Jason Robards, a great stage actor, and he meets Robards and Peckinpah meet through Spencer Tracy, of all people. Robards was a very good friend of Spencer Tracy, and Tracy must have seen the Wild Bunch, or not the Wild Bunch, but Ride the High Country, because he said he told Robards, this is a really good young director coming up here. And Robards and Peckinpah hit it off really well because they had both served in World War II, both served in the Far East. They had something in common. And I also saw in Robards' performance where he's photographed Cheyenne from, if you've ever seen Once Upon a Time in the West, you see as if Peckinpah is let's do a Leone close-up here. Now he doesn't do the close-up of the eyes, but Cable Hogue looks just like Cheyenne in this movie, so I couldn't help but notice some of those similarities. Stella Stevens is really good as well, playing the prostitute, and then the whole sort of atmosphere of the film, of this ballad, is of a biblical allegory. So when Cable's lost in the desert, he has a conversation with God. He's 4 days, he's lost, searching for water. And he has faith. He has faith that God will save him. And just at the moment when he thinks, well, I guess this is it. I guess, this is what you want from me. He sees mud on his boots. He finds water. He's been rewarded for his faith in God. And if you think I'm maybe reading too much into this, Sam was brought up in a very religious, fundamentalist religious family. His mother, very much so. He was very much influenced by his mother. So he knew the Bible through and through. He even went to I believe he went to a Christian college for his first year of college. And so there's preachers here too. You could view the desert, this landscape, this barren landscape, mountains in the background, as a kind of cathedral, a theatrical cathedral for these kind of oddball characters to play out this biblical parable. And So we have preachers. So there was a preacher in the Wild Bunch who who figures prominently in the opening scene. Here we have three preachers. Two are on the sideline. One's hellfire and brimstone. The other is portrayed as a little bit of a hypocrite. Brief, very brief scenes. But the main scene, or the main preacher, is played by David Warner, and he has his church on his horseback. He doesn't. He's a bit dodgy, to say the least, especially in his relationship to women. But he does provide some sort of spiritual basis for the story that Peckinpah is trying to tell. And David Warner is absolutely great in this film. He would also be in this. David Warner would also be in Sam's next film, Straw Dogs. So Sam has survived his trial in the opening credit sequence, and God has rewarded him. He's given him water. But the Cable has to learn more than that in this kind of biblical allegory, and he does. He learns forgiveness. He learns sacrifice. The film, I think, has a couple brilliant scenes at the end of the film. But I must admit that it can at times be rather leisurely, rather meandering. You think where's Sam going with this? You know, I mean, narratively and thematically, seems to lose its place along the way, which I think this kind of thinness affects many of Peckinpah's movies, and why they maybe aren't seen as great films as he would have. I'm sure he would have hoped to, because he considered himself a very serious artist. And there's another element that Sam's work in television kind of, especially in this film, kind of plays against the great vistas. We see Lucien Ballard, who also filmed the Wild Bunch, filmed this, so we get, you know, these great visual vistas of the desert. And but then Sam films the actors, and he foregrounds them in ways that, you know, very tight shots of people, and as if he was filming for television. And a lot of westerns, a lot of Western movies that were made in that time, and the post-TV boom of westerns also had that particular aspect to them. But you know, it's saved by the performances by Sam. The personal, there's kind of a personal touch to all of Peckinpah's films, and indeed, on the supplements, on both Wild Bunch and on Cable Hogue, there is a commentary. Nick Redman moderating a commentary by 3 Peckinpah biographers. And I think I've actually read one of those biographies many, many years ago. And he tries to keep them grounded, but when you talk about Peckinpah worship, these 3 biographers are, I mean, they just absolutely, Sam could do no wrong. At least in the Wild Bunch commentary, which I could not finish. It was just too much. The hyperbole, instead of giving us the kind of historical background, they give us some of that, and they know Peckinpah through and through, his life and his career in the movies. They just comment on every scene. Oh, look at this scene. This is so brilliant. This is my favorite scene 5 different times in the movie. This is, oh, no one does this like Sam. Look how he framed this. So the hyperbole gets a bit much. I did listen to the whole commentary on this, but again, we have Peckinpah worship. And Stella Stevens has an interview on the supplements from about maybe 10 years ago, has very mixed feelings about Peckinpah. And she had never heard of him, but you know, she was told, oh, this guy is, you know, he's a genius director, he's you know, great artist. And when she came to the set, she found this short little, very skinny man who she thought this, and she realized that the cast, many people in the cast that knew Sam well, and the crew that worked with Sam, they worshipped him. And so why is this man being worshipped? So she had mixed feelings about Peckinpah, because she didn't like him personally, in the sense that she thought he was a shit stirrer. He would stir up stuff on the set and then get people fighting, and he would run away. And he was, you know, she thought he was a real self-centered kind of liar kind of person. But she does give a great performance. I mean, when you hear her talk about Sam, and I think they had some interactions later on in Stella Stevens' career. In fact, she says Sam promised her one more movie after this because evidently she was taking a cut in salary for this film, and he said, "Well, I'll put you in another movie." And he never did, but he did try because he was going to cast Stella Stevens in The Getaway, Steve McQueen film that he made a couple years after this. And he wanted Stella Stevens, was the part that eventually goes to Ali MacGraw, Steve McQueen, the star and really the producer and the driving force of the film, The Getaway. He sat down with her and he said, you're too powerful a presence on the screen. I don't want to compete with that. So Ali MacGraw was relatively new and she didn't have that Stella Stevens oomph to her. And so she was very disappointed that she did not get that part. So next up will be a really difficult one for me to talk about, and that's Straw Dogs. And this is a film that disturbed a lot of people in 1971, and it certainly disturbed me. I was really affected by this film when I first saw it, and it was highly problematic today because of a rape scene that's in this film. But it was also highly problematic in its day. But this is the film where Sam doesn't meander. There's nothing but meat on the bone in this film. It's Sam's filmmaking, I think, at its best. Every shot contributes to the tension that we get to the bloody climax of Straw Dogs. But anyways, that's next. And this has Straw Dogs is a Criterion release and has a commentary by Stephen Prince. And I've read Stephen Prince's book on Peckinpah, and I will be drawing on that. I haven't shown it in these first two episodes, but I will be drawing on Stephen Prince's because his analysis of Straw Dogs is absolutely brilliant. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.